background in emergency medicine. As such, I've practiced clinically for about 16 years, mostly in academic and trauma settings. I joined Humana about 5 years ago and have done a lot of work within the markets in the Southeast Division, and am very endeared to my role with the Tampa Bay Bold Goal. Thanks for having me again.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Joyce. Dr. LaDonna Butler, it's always so wonderful to see you. You do so much amazing work, here in the Pinellas County area. I'll kick it off to you if you just want to share what else are you up to?
Hi, I'm so pleased to join this conversation. Denise, thank you so much for having me. I am the executive director and the founder of the Well for Life, a healing space in St. Petersburg, prioritizing the needs of those who have been impacted most by systemic issues. I'm so pleased to be a principal investigator with the University of South Florida with Reckoning with Race in infant and early childhood mental health. And as we consider all of our employees, we also consider how their families are being impacted by their own mental health. And last and most least, certainly not the least, is my identity as a survivor. So I'm pleased to also represent Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. And so individuals who have been impacted by community level crime often show up to work. And we want to be able to support those individuals, have a positive work experience. So I'll bring all of those lenses in our conversations as we talk about mental health in the workplace. Thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you. And yeah, so we're going to start the conversation about mental health in the workplace, and really, what does the workplace look like for us today? I think the majority of us, we're still working from home, we're working remotely, we have lots to deal with around, but yet some of us are, segueing back to an actual physical office space. But I think, starting a conversation about someone's well-being can be difficult, and especially in the workplace, because as employers, right, if we notice a colleague has a bad cough or started to limp, we would ask them, hey, how are you doing? Maybe offer them a cough drop, do you need me to get you some water? We see that, you're limping. But sometimes I think employers and even employees, we can be nervous about asking someone, how are they doing mentally? If we are concerned that we're seeing something that's just not right. And I think also as an employee and an employer, we may worry that if we ask this question, are we going to make the situation worse? Or are we overstepping those professional boundaries? And I don't really think there's a perfect way to start a conversation about someone's mental well-being, but I think it's very important if you as a leader or as a colleague see something that might be not the same behavior or mood as a colleague, is to start that conversation. So I will throw it out there that to both of our panelists, and we'll start with you, Dr. Butler, is if you can just tell us what you observed when it comes to the stigma around having that conversation about mental health in the workplace.
Thank you so much. As you mentioned, it's sometimes difficult because we have separated physical health from mental health. And so we don't see it the same historically. I want to also point to, because of the pandemic, people are talking more and more about their feelings. And we're beginning to see a normalizing of talking about stress, talking about changes, talking about how things are impacting us in a very positive way, because now we can normalize. Every single one of us has had moments where we have felt overwhelmed, have had moments where we have typical coping strategies that work. However, because of all of the other stresses that are happening, including stressors that we're observing in people that we love and really care about, we have an equalizer now. So in the past, it was there was more of a stigma because there was a way of separating ourselves from what was happening. Now, we all can relate to what it feels like to not be at our best selves. Well, with that, It allows for there to be a new door. We can share our own story. We can speak our own truth about how we're navigating through life in times that we have not been maybe at our most prime. We wouldn't rate ourselves at a 10. So using our own narratives as a door opening to allow someone else to share their story is one of the things that we're now seeing. People are talking about it. People can now share from an equal place, and people can now have the door open to have a natural conversation about a very natural issue that is happening in our life. Now, I would be lying if we said there is no uncomfortability. Well, we are now doing more uncomfortable things every day and finding ways to navigate it. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to our other host, our other panelists who can continue on.
Dr. Joyce, what are your thoughts about that?
Denise and Dr. Butler, you both brought up a really important word today, which is stigma, right? So when you think about the word stigma, it has a very negative connotation. And to Dr. Butler's point, I think we're realizing that it's not a stigma. It is normal. Everybody has an up day, a down day, an in-between day. And, hopefully we land more in between than highs or lows. But I do think it's also important, as a former member of the armed forces, I was in the United States Air Force Reserves for about 8 years. And I think, one of the main topics that they always talk about is the wounds that you can't see, right? So you mentioned, Denise, you talked about, seeing when somebody has injured their knee or sprained their ankle or whatever it might be, right? But there's a lot of wounds that we hold on the inside that we never let anybody see because it is a scar, but it's a scar on the inside. And I think to Dr. Butler's point, COVID exposed a lot of that, no matter how resilient and how strong each one of us is. I mean, having a pandemic and a situation that, none of us in our lifetime have really truly ever experienced that level of stress or change or uncertainty, and certainly, to some level of discord. I do think it's important that we take away that word stigma and just say it's health, right? And it's a holistic perspective of physical and mental health, and that's what makes up a person.
Wonderful. And let's kind of stay on that word stigma. So Dr. Joyce, you mentioned stigma. We've all know it. We know stigma is one of the most common reasons why people are not seeking treatment or counseling. So Dr. Joyce, how can leadership teams work together to reduce mental health stigma with their staff?
That's the $1 million question, right? And I can tell you, as being a very humble part of the Humana leadership teams, one of the things that Humana did a really great job, I think, last year was understanding what was happening in the pandemic. I mean, outside of the true, the actual virus, right, in the pandemic, but knowing that there were so many impacts, right? Just because many of us went home necessarily wasn't always the safest place for a lot of people. Home isn't always, the comfort that it is maybe for me or for you or other people on this phone call. And so I think one of the things that we really reached out and did as employers was supporting the employees, but a little bit more, confidentially, right? So we did a lot with telehealth and telebehavioral health. We certainly did a lot with EAP, kind of offering up more EAP services than we usually have as part of our benefits package and opening that up to all associates company-wide. We also created extra, PTO days, like knowing that this is here for you to support you. So to your point, it may not be so comfortable to talk to somebody or to feel like you're being stigmatized by saying, I'm having a really tough time with this, but here's a confidential way for you to get the help that you need. And we as your leaders are holistically supportive. And we even increased the number of PTO days that we were offering for various things. Like we know that the children all had to come home for schooling. The dogs and the cats and the kids are all on the WebEx now and you're in your meetings. And so we offered people time off to say, we get it. Like it's a lot. You're on a WebEx and the kids are on a WebEx. If you just need the time, here's the time, and we're supporting you to get the wellness and well-being that you need.
Yeah, wonderful. And I know, me and my leadership role with my staff, I always remind people, mark at least 20 to 30 minutes on your calendar and you just have to step away, go outside, go out, go meet somebody for lunch. But I think it's really important to do that self-care, to really schedule that on your calendar. Because like you said, Dr. Joyce, we're all in these meetings. We could be on something, our partner or kids could be in the next room on WebEx. And it's a lot of stressors. And Speaking of stressors, I know Dr. Butler, you mentioned that word several times. Are there any common mental stressors that individuals or clients maybe that you partner with that you've noticed that more, and how have those stressors um, impacted their daily responsibilities during their work life?
Yeah. So we've seen across the spectrum individuals name different stressors at work or their inability to access work. So at work, we'll name that for, well, maybe, yeah, we'll name at work is survivor's guilt. The fact that their hours have not been cut, the fact that they're still showing up, the fact that maybe they're able to maintain a sense of normal schedule during the most abnormal time of our being. People are struggling with that. Being able to still show up in spaces and still have the benefit of colleagues to be able to engage with is an actual stressor. And I don't think that I thought about that as being um, a potential thing that we needed to navigate as a workforce. Naming for individuals and providing space for individuals to talk about what that feels like, to still be gainfully employed. Other stressors are managing multiple priorities during their work life. As Dr. Joyce and Denise named, there are dogs and cats and children and mothers who have dementia in the space, that we are still trying to have Zoom meetings. We're still needing to maintain our households while also perform exceptionally at work, coupled with the whole guilt that we still have a job, right? So that's another stressor that is there. We can't forget those who already had a pre-existing condition, meaning there was already underlying depression, anxiety, or trauma history, that all of the things that are happening right now are simply compounding. So where they learn some normal stressors or coping strategies, they are being compressed. And so being able to perform at the same rate is even more difficult for them. So for employers, again, simply recognizing those things goes a long way. I had an opportunity to talk to a client, and she said the fact that my employer said that they understood that I had 3 children still at home while I was doing the Zoom meeting, she said all I needed was the acknowledgement. The fact that they were able to have a flexible work schedule. So when her children returned, when kids went back to school, from that 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock hour, being able to take that as the lunch to get family settled, that was another strategy that actually helped with managing the stress load. I'll name for a little bit those who have reduced hours but are still showing up. Because of maintaining safety, which every company has to do. Sometimes the office space itself requires there to be a split shift, or individuals have reduced hours because maybe the same load of work isn't available. People are finding themselves in a place where they have to make financial decisions, even though they love their work, and that is stressful. The fact that some individuals make more on unemployment, and it would be more sensible for them to do that so they can maintain their family and maintain everything else that needs to happen, including their mental health, that's an added stressor. So things that employers could do is simply talk about what is the real plan so people know how long they can anticipate that. Having conversations and even doing preventative work with individuals by offering wellness credits or wellness services, or bringing folks in to offer stress reducing strategies. Those are things that employers can do to help mitigate what they're experiencing right now.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think Dr. Bell, you touched on some really, great points about, being flexible with your work schedule, providing that space, and also, encouraging other colleagues to talk to, each other. So, Dr. Joyce, from your perspective, have you noticed any trends over the past 14 months that workplaces, employers have taken to support an employee's mental health during, working remotely during this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just kind of smiling thinking about the workplace, because one of the conversations that we just had in a town hall meeting, somebody said, he said, I missed the water cooler, right? So this is kind of an old analogy, right? And so we talked about, could we do a virtual water cooler? Like, would it help, at the start of a 1 hour WebEx, if we had the first 10 minutes, kind of that water cooler space? And then somebody else said, well, that's fine, but maybe I don't want to be at the same water cooler that you're at. And I thought, well, now that's really interesting, right? So when you think about it, when you're in an office setting, Denise, I might come to you and say, hey, Denise, I went to Home Goods last night and we're having a conversation about that. And I might see LaDonna a little while later and say, hey, LaDonna, I had this great show that I watched last night. It might be very different conversations, right? But we're able to have that connection and that downtime that kind of brings us together when we're together in a meeting space. So I think it's become really important for us in the workplace to understand, while this is great, the virtual connection, people are really missing that tangible, physical, human connection. And I think we're now, thanks to the CDC guidelines, some of those changes, working to safely move our employees back into a workspace. We're also being very mindful, again, thinking about, all the changes we experienced in 2020. We're realizing that somebody may have an ailing parent that they're now caring for, or they may have children that they've decided to stick with homeschooling and they don't want them to return to school for whatever reason. And so instead of mandating, hey, Preeti, you used to work in the office, you need to come back to the office. Now these are the options. Who would like to go back, right? Because again, it's not just the 2020 mental health and wellness, but it's the going forward, right? We made so many drastic changes last year that have bled into this year, will probably bleed into years ahead. And so it's important, I think, to take all of that into context and not to say, well, 2020, the calendar year, flipped a page, but we're here and we're just going to go back to the way things were, because we aren't, right? We've all kind of migrated to a different space today. And so I think, for all of us in the employer work field and the leadership space, it's really important to mitigate that for the associates and the employees. Because again, you can't be your best self at work if you're just not your best self, because you're not being given that option to do that.
Right. And, you made a good point. As people are segueing back into the workspace, I think there is going to be an additional maybe stress. Maybe I've been vaccinated. Is my colleague, vaccinated? Have they been around people that aren't? So with that, Dr. Joyce, what are some practical initiatives employers or HR teams can implement to better support the staff's overall mental wellness? Could it be really looking at your EPA, maybe offering some more wellness benefits? What do you think are some practical tips?
Yeah, so again, there's not many things, and I still practice as an emergency physician. So when I think about 2020, like overall, it's like a big frowny face. However, there are a few bright sides to the plague, right? So to speak, to use that expression. And I think one of those, again, is the flexibility and resilience that everybody has come to recognize and to kind of make a part of normal for us, right? As opposed to being so rigid in what we do. And so I think, Denise, to your questions about, kind of the safety of the workplace, which definitely would contribute to somebody's mental health and well-being. Again, the temperature checks, the COVID screening questionnaires. So for us at Humana, for the offices that have slowly begun to allow associates back in, there's a screening questionnaire that you have to fill out, no different than, when I show up to the ER to work a shift and I'm screened at the gate before I can walk into work. Masks are still required in the public spaces, and we're trying to currently mitigate the guidelines, the national guidelines, the state guidelines, the local guidelines, just to make sure that people are comfortable again. But I think to that point, the most important piece of that is, one, understanding who wants to return to work and not mandating a return to work that's unnecessary to kind of create that, mental anguish, especially for those who might be still feeling a little vague about the pandemic or a little unsure about the virus and kind of, course and trajectory. But more than that, we decided as a company, 2020 was so successful with all the telehealth that we had, we were offering free of charge. So no copays. We extended that initially to our Medicare Advantage members and then realized the need for our commercial plan and our own employees. And so we've continued that this year. And we know that there's actually been an uptick in utilization, especially of telebehavioral health from the psychologists and the psychiatrists. And I think it's really crucial that we recognize the importance of that and kind of keep that going for the associates, because again, that confidentiality, you might be at work and have a really stressful time, and to be able to take that time at work to maybe get on a quick doctor on demand visit would be priceless for the employee.
Right. I think, this all comes down to communicating. How do we communicate that? I feel confident enough to jump on this telehealth call. I feel confident that if I talk to somebody, they're going to recognize that, I need support. But again, it all comes back to that very word that we've been talking about at the very beginning is stigma. And so with that, Dr. Butler, I'm going to toss it over to you. And we're going to take a different turn. We talked about some positive aspects, but why do you think some individuals may not feel comfortable communicating with an employer or their manager about needing mental health support? And does that go beyond stigma?
I believe that we are still a performance-driven workforce. And when we are talking about our best pieces of ourselves, we know that employers want to always highlight those who are doing extremely well. If we were to highlight our vulnerabilities, people are nervous that that information could cause employers to shift their perceptions of that person's capacity. Their performance rating might suffer. Opportunities that would be available to them, people begin to manage whether you can handle it or not. So those are reasons, valid reasons, that people have about not sharing the most vulnerable pieces of themselves, especially if there's an element of mistrust. So we have to name that today. There are other pieces, right? So yes, stigma, and also really that supervisor, because of the power hierarchy, has the ability to rate performance, provide opportunities or not. The other thing is really looking at themselves and being reflective around their own capacity. And what does it mean to me to say that I am not mentally well? We often only talk about mental illness, so people only manage their illnesses or sickness, versus really thinking about what are the things that I can do to promote good emotional health, good mental health. And so that really goes along with education, attitudes, and perceptions around mental health in the workplace. Well, we can do stuff about that, right? Peer-to-peer supervision strategies and opportunities for folks to come together and talk about how they're doing at work is a way. Reflective supervision and learning about that strategy where people are talking about functioning well and still needing to manage other elements of health that might be getting in the way. And third is really talking about, well, how do we maintain a culture of good health, complete health, as a part of our organization? And so those are reasons why people don't talk about it, that go beyond just stigma, and some things that we can do about it.
And, I think, a lot of our conversation, I think, we put a lot of this on the employer, making certain the employer looks out for those signs and symptoms, of a mental health condition, looking at their mood, has their work productivity suffered. It's up to the employer to make certain that they have, a very well-rounded EPA, and looking at different ways to implement mental wellness benefits. But let's now kind of flip that switch and look, from an employee perspective, Dr. Butler, how do you recommend for employees to communicate with their managers and workplace leaders if they need that mental health day? So not always put it on their supervisor or manager to recognize it, but let's talk about the employee. How can we communicate that? What would be best to, how do we do that?
knowledge is power, right?
Yes.
I go back to my grandmother's thing because she's so wise. She says, a closed mouth won't get fed. If you are not sharing places where you need professional growth and support, or when you need to take some time off, no one can really respond to that. So for the employee, really valuing your own health is critical for your own sustainability. So I say that. However, I know it's hard. It's hard. So looking at the lines of communication, who in the company do you feel comfortable talking to? Right. What are some of the wellness strategies that exist that maybe you haven't taken advantage of that are offered to the group? So maybe you don't need to be as transparent in the beginning. Maybe there's EAP. If you don't know how to navigate it, well, talking to a colleague or reading over the manual or going to HR, which has an obligation to not share your concerns, might be the other option. So prioritizing your own health and well-being is so critical. Having multiple lines of communication so that you can access group as well as individual private lines to access the help that you need. And then third, getting with other people within the company that may have some similar experiences and also support mental health in the workplace.
And Dr. Joyce, I'm probably going to put you on the spot a little bit because I definitely want to hear your perspective, because I know a while ago, you mentioned that it's important, to implement PTO, PTO days, personal time off. And sometimes when you look at an employer's PTO form, you have that line reason. And again, it comes back to that stigma of, do I put the reason that I need a mental health day? What are they going to think if I put that on there? So I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, but I'd really love to hear your thoughts about that. Is, how would you recommend an employee communicating this to their manager, about, I need a mental health day? Do you have any recommendations?
No, I certainly do. And I don't think I could agree enough with Dr. Butler and some of her statements of, feeling safe in that space. And so, again, everybody's safety zone at their workplace it's going to be different. It's certainly going to depend on your supervisor, teammates, what have you. I will say one of the things I find important is, do you have to disclose everything, right? So if you're asking for PTO, it can be something as simple as, I'm taking the day off. Nobody needs to be able to ask you where or why or how or what have you, right? And we certainly know just from people getting vaccinated, especially like on my team, I lead a team of some 500 clinicians, and there have been people that have said, hey, I just got my second dose, or I just got my first dose, and I am destroyed today. Or somebody just as simple would say, I just got my vaccine, I'm taking the day off. Fine, call it what it is, right? So to that point, I'm going to kind of circle back to where I started. If it's okay to say I got the vaccine and I'm taking a day off, it really should be okay to say, I just need a mental wellness day. And that should be okay. And hopefully we will all get there in our various enterprises and work settings. But in the interim, a PTO day is a PTO day, right? It's a personal reason, personal time off is what I would put in there, to be, perfectly honest. And I will just add a couple of other things. We talked about, finding other people that you can relate to, or finding that safe space at work. So I go back to the telecommunication. That's what we've kind of leaned in on because it's been 2020 into 2021. But I go back to our offices here in Tampa at the Humana. There's treadmills, and we kind of do this 100-day dash. And I bring that up because when you're looking at other people doing healthy things for themselves, you kind of get up from your desk and you might be on a WebEx, but you'll walk around with them and just listen, right? So being able to echo and to mirror those healthy behaviors is, I think, just as important as what probably many of us did, with all these memes of home with the kids drinking wine, home with the husband drinking tequila, like whatever, like I'm making a joke of it. But I think very sadly, like a lot of people, that was the coping skill because that's all we knew, kind of huddled up, isolated in quarantine. And I think we really need to create that shift, whether virtually or otherwise, but hopefully in person, to let's mirror great behaviors. Let's mirror healthy behaviors, whether it's going for a walk with your colleague around the block at work, or whether it's, maybe you are going to meet up for dinner and a drink afterwards, but it's one dinner and one drink with your colleagues where you can discuss with LaDonna and talk about, had a really stressful day at work today. Let's chat about it. And I feel safe talking to you. And what are some, strategies I can use to talk to my boss tomorrow to say I need a PTO day? And being able to have those shared conversations, I think, becomes very important going forward.
I think that's wonderful. Both of you had great points. And, I know, again, with NAMI, we try to, when we're on our calls, I'm always like, okay, let's everybody, I want to see your water. Because again, are you on that, fifth, Diet Coke of the day? Or, are you on your 10th coffee of the day? And I think that, and we all talk about it, physical health and mental health go so hand in hand. You really have to look at both sides. And, we try to, if we're on calls all day, again, I tell my team, hey, take time out, go outside, or, take your computer. I want to see everybody in the sunlight for 20 minutes. I want to see you drinking water. I don't want to see any Cokes, on this Zoom. Show your water. And when we do get together, which isn't very often because we are also working remotely, but, we try to, let's go outside. Even if we walk around the parking lot, we still need to get some type of healthy exercise in. I think, again, eating right, getting enough exercise, asking people, how are you sleeping? Make certain that, I don't want you at your computer at 9, 10 o'clock at night. We need to take those breaks. So again, physical health and mental health, they really go hand in hand. I'm glad that both of you talked about that and recognized that. So with that being said, what are some other maybe additional action items that a workplace can begin today to create a culture of mindfulness and mental well-being on the employer side and on the employee side? And so, Dr. Joyce, we'll go ahead and kick it off with you. If you can maybe talk about the employer side, what are some action items that the workplace can do?
Again, just to reiterate, what we've kind of talked through already, just the return to work strategies that are healthy and amenable to everybody's needs at this time, continuing the telehealth programs, the EAP programs, keeping that extra PTO on hand for those that need it, either for vaccination strategies, true illness days, or whatever they need, mental wellness days. We also do a thing at Humana that I really love. It paused for a little while, and I don't remember why really in 2020, but we've kicked it back off, and it's called Take 10. And this email pops up, company-wide every day with a Take 10. Take 10 for meditation, Take 10 chair yoga, Take 10, we're going to do quad stretches or whatever it is. But if nothing else, even if you are on a call and you can't actively participate in the Take 10, it's like a little flag that you were talking about of like, oh yeah, I need to take 10. So sometimes when I see that flash across, with the emails, I might just stand up even at my desk, or I might take my little phone and just walk around the house, or, go outside, although it is like 95 degrees in Tampa today, but just go outside and just get a little bit of sunshine.
That's why you need
but, I think I look at my little Nalgene bottle that I have. And so, I think, it's important, again, for employers not to forget that just because we flipped a calendar page and just because the CDC guidelines are changing for many of us and folks are kind of getting somewhat back to what they thought was normal, none of this has gone away. And all of those impacts that Dr. Butler talked about, like if you already suffered from depression, anxiety, isolation, loneliness, it only compounded severely in 2020, and none of that went away when the calendar page flipped. If anything, we need to do a lot more outreach for those individuals to ensure that they're coming back fully healthy and emotionally well.
Love that. Dr. Butler, from a employee focus, what do you think some action items that the workforce can take from an employee perspective?
I want to say everything that Dr. Joyce said. Take advantage of it. For the employee wellness days, that's what we call them at our organization. We call them employee wellness days, as we offer them company-wide. When you see that those days are available for you, take them. Take photos of what you're doing during the wellness days and share them maybe on your group Slack or during your on the group's website or whatever your informal network is. It sets up a model for well-being. It sets up a model for what taking these opportunities and benefits really are. Second, along with the benefits, EAP is a real thing. And if you consider how much money your employer is offering you to, I like to calculate it. I say they are giving me about $700 for free every single year. When I think about how much it would cost if I were to pay a therapist on my own, that's money on the table. So every single year, using your wellness benefits, using your EAP as a way of doing a simple check-in or doing a deeper dive into what's most important, which is your overall health. Other things is create a group chat. The water cooler example that was named earlier is still alive. I know I'm getting private messages around, girl, what we doing this weekend? Or how was this meeting? Or are you making sure you're blocking off time in between Zoom meetings so that you can take a breath? Those are critical things that I can do for myself, but also encourage my colleagues to do so that we're normalizing good mental well-being throughout the process. And last is when there's a problem, say it early. Find out who are those champions within the company that you can go to and talk about some of the hardest things, because they can also support you in navigating and accessing the support that you need within the organization. Listen to the whispers before they become screams. We want to take care of our health before it becomes a performance issue at our workplaces.
I totally concur with both of you. And I know lately I've been seeing there's companies or there's apps now where, prior to getting on a Zoom call, there's like a 2-minute mindfulness app that shows. And then after you watch that, then you're able to be let into this meeting. And I think that is wonderful. And I know the other thing, going back to communicating with your employees and, making certain that they are stepping away is, normally on Fridays, I ask, what are you doing this weekend? Because I want to hear my team tell me, I'm, going kayaking. I'm going to spend the day at the beach. I'm going boating. I'm going to Disney World. I mean, I want them to, I don't want to hear, oh, I'm going to be working on this report. No. This is your time. And I always make certain that, again, workday ends at 5 o'clock on a Friday. We really need to be mindful of it. And as employers and employees, it's so good to talk about that and to have that line of communication, because you shouldn't be, chained to your desk 24/7. It's not healthy for, your overall well-being. So I love that. I love about the well-being champions, identifying somebody, within your organization to do that and to lead that charge. I just love it. So that is really all the questions that I had today for both of you. And I thank you so much. But Gabriella, I don't know if we have any questions in the chat that anybody wants to ask. So if you do, please put that in the chat and we will definitely throw that out to our panelists.
Not yet. Just giving everyone just one more minute.
Okay, great. Well, I know something, and if you all want to maybe share in your chat, Dr. Butler just wanted to know, as we're sitting here, is to share some of your joyful moments. What are your joyful moments, either today or yesterday or last week? What are some of your joyful moments? I know with me, it was fun. My cat decided to hang out with me all day in my office. And, he even jumped up here, and that was my joyful moment. I actually, besides looking at people on the screen all day, I was actually to look at my cat and, spend time with him. And I know that he loved that too. So for me, that was my joyful moment, was to be cooped up with my cat all day long. Somebody put on there,
we have some great examples.
Yep.
Yes, we have some great examples. Playing tennis with their husband, taking a PTO day with their daughter, going to travel. I love traveling. I agree with that. Some great tips on here.
Wonderful. I love to see all of that. So again, we do want to, thank you for joining us today. I think Gabriella is going to talk about some other mental health webinars that are coming up. But again, I just want to remind everybody on this call that really, there's no perfect way to start a conversation about someone's well-being, but I think, if being non-judgmental, be kind, be empathetic is the key. And if we all kind of do all three of that, I think it will make it a lot easier, not only for employees, but also for employers to start that conversation. And again, we don't expect anyone to be an expert, but if you can listen and then help someone to get that extra support or guide them in the right direction to get that information, you can definitely make a big difference. So I just kind of want to end with that. And again, thank you to Dr. Joyce and to Dr. Butler. Thank you, Humana, The Well, and Molina Cares for sponsoring this webinar. And Gabriella, what do we have coming up next?
So thank you everyone again for attending. As Denise said, we're really excited because we are in the second half of May, Mental Health Awareness Month. A couple action items you all can take from here if you enjoyed what was discussed is attending another free webinar, which we'll share more of that in the next slide. You can also make the pledge. One program that NAMI Pinellas has launched is called the Stigma Free program. And that's for companies that are looking to kind of take that next step in promoting a stigma-free work culture, getting free resources, getting ways that you can promote more mental wellness tips, similar to what was discussed here. So definitely check it out on our website. Also, if you're looking to get support, definitely call our helpline. It's Monday through Friday from 9 to 6. You'll get plugged in with one of our NAMI Pinellas staff members who can help get you plugged into local community resources for mental health, or if you'd like to give support. Everything that NAMI Pinellas does is free, of course. We don't believe in charging any individual or family member as a penny. So if you have, the means to give some support for someone else who may need mental health support, definitely we encourage you to give for Mental Health Awareness Month. And then lastly, here's just a quick slide of our upcoming webinars. We've already finished today, which is mental health, workplace mental health. And we have a couple more coming up next week. So definitely scan that QR code, take a photo, or you can visit our mental health awareness landing page at nami-pinellas.org/MHM 2021.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We're actually ending just 15 minutes early. So we are giving you 15 minutes of some PTO time. So make the best out of these next 15 minutes, make the best out of your day. And remember, please don't let stigma get in the way, whether you are an employee or an employer, to really communicate with one another, talk about your emotional well-being. And if you do need help and support, please know that you are not alone. And that is the campaign message this year for mental health awareness. So thank you so much. Everybody stay safe, be well, and have a great day. Thank you so much.